Good evening. Welcome to Reflections. Our guest tonight is Frederick Wilhelm, an 89-year resident of Granby, currently resides at 127 Wells Road. He's our first guest from Granby, and we'd like to welcome him here tonight. Good evening, Fred.
It's my honor to be here.
How are you
I
tonight?
hope I contribute something to your program.
You just got back from Florida, so this is a little,
It was quite a change.
a little bit of a shock for you. Okay, you were born on May 11th, 1921, and you were born in
Windsor, Connecticut.
Windsor, Connecticut. Like I said, you're 89 years old, soon to be 90. And your wife's name is Edith.
Edith.
You have 5 children, 10 grandchildren, and it's a pleasure to have you here tonight.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Okay, so why don't we start out where we always do. You were born, what are your memories, your earliest memories from where you were born and grew up?
I think my earliest memories are from the farm that my father had early in the 20s, and that was where Stephen Hayes is now, and Mr. Bosco has part of that farm, the old house and the barn.
Okay, where is that?
It's just north of 329 North Granby Road.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
Nice
you basically grew up there. You didn't spend.
Well, no, I just spent a few years there that I have memories of.
Okay.
Because you see, those were difficult times for the farms.
Okay.
And the Depression started in on the farms before it started in the other parts of the economy.
No, just jumping back, you weren't born in Granby.
I was born in Windsor.
And how long? When did you move from Windsor to Granby?
Sometime in the 20s, but that I couldn't tell you.
Okay. So you had you probably don't have any memories of Windsor as a child.
Well, then I have memories when we went back there.
visit.
That I remember very
Still
well.
have connections. So your family moved here to Wells Road, and that's probably. So you must have started school in Granby.
No, I started school, elementary school in Windsor.
Okay, all right. So
But I finished in high school. I went to Simsbury High School because Granby was sending all their students to Simsbury, high school students at that time.
Okay, great. So what are your earliest memories of Granby when you were a child?
Well, my earliest memories of Granby was from living on that farm, on the first farm that my father had.
Okay.
And I can remember sitting there and watching in the winter as the farmers would bring their cans of milk down to a stand.
Right.
Because that would be as far as they would pick up the milk.
Okay.
If you lived beyond that point, you had to get it to the stand.
Right. So they would bring it down.
And they would bring
pick
it down.
What did they actually farm on the farm as you remember as a child?
Well, the main thing in all the farms at that time, dairy and a few acres of tobacco.
Okay.
Not the shade-grown tobacco, but broadleaf tobacco.
Yeah. I've seen pictures of my great-grandfather's farm in Suffield.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
But now at that point, were they still they were still farming with horses? There wasn't.
Well, yes, and there was, and even in the in the 30s yet, because
Right.
basically people didn't have the money to buy a tractor.
Right. So they had tractors.
They had tractors, but the small farms didn't take a while till they got some.
Right. So you went to, you remember the farm as a child?
I remember that farm, yeah, and then some memories from there.
Now, so you went to school. What was your first school? Do you remember, other than coming from in Granby, what was your first school?
My first school in Granby was Simsbury High School.
Oh, so you went to school in Windsor until you...
Elementary years I spent in Windsor.
Oh, okay. So how old were you? Do you have a rough idea what age you were when you moved from...
15.
Okay, so you spent your formative years other than...
And then a few years that I spent up on the other farm.
Oh, okay. So if you were... what was Windsor? What were the Windsor schools like then?
Well, they were, old-fashioned schools, but they had all the accommodations in there, which Granby didn't have.
Right.
Granby still had a one-room school system.
Okay. You had primarily probably a bigger, more diverse school system in Windsor than you would.
Oh yes,
Granby was a pretty small town back then.
Yeah. Even Windsor was a small town too. Yeah,
they
quite
had a lot of
different.
tobacco farms there too. Farms. Okay, so you moved to Granby when you're 15 years old, and what are your first memories of the difference or coming into? Well, you had the family here.
I moved with the family.
Okay, so you moved to the farm,
Right.
and you that's when you began farming. So prior to that, what was your family?
My father had a store in Windsor.
Okay, all right. And what kind of store was
And
that?
a grocery store.
Okay, interesting. So
And I think he has the foresight to see that the small stores were on their way out even at that point. That was in 1936.
right. So if you were to look back and what would your first memory of Granby be? I mean, do you remember driving into you were old enough to have some conception of the town. I mean, and what brought your family here? I mean, why did they come to Granby rather than?
Well, I think because they lived here before and liked it.
Okay.
But the coincidence that the one farm where my daughter is now is right next to the other one.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
So you're 15 years old. You're going to Simsbury High School. Was that drew from the towns of
Granby, East Granby,
Okay.
Avon,
Yep.
Tarryville,
Wow.
Granby.
Pretty good sized school.
That was all in what is the town office building in Simsbury today.
Okay, that big brick.
Big
stone building.
sandstone building there.
Yeah, right in the center. It's a town hall.
It's the town hall, town offices, I guess,
offices,
in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you went to school there, and did you when you graduated there? Did you go to college?
Yes, I was fortunate to get enough to get a scholarship to Wesleyan University, or I never would have gone to Wesleyan University.
It's a good school.
Yeah, very good school.
What did you study?
English.
Okay, so you went and is that what you made a career of, or did you?
I ended up teaching English.
Oh, good for you. In what school systems?
In the state, I started the Hartford branch of the University of Connecticut.
Okay, was that located right where it is now, and kind of on the
That's
West Hartford
located
Road?
up on just beyond St. Joseph's College on the next corner.
Yeah, that's where it is now.
Yeah.
It's technically in West Hartford.
In West Hartford.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I moved around 3 times where they moved around with.
Okay, so and where did you meet your wife?
My wife I met through a mutual friend.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you went to school, you got a job right out of school teaching?
No, I worked for the Employment Service for a while.
For the what?
Employment Service.
Oh, the Employment Service.
Employment Service, which was.
So that would have been in the late 40s?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
That came about because I was there as a veteran to collect my whatever you could get.
Right.
And they said, "What kind of job would you like?" And I said, "I want to take a job like yours."
Okay.
And they got a call a few days after that.
They hired you. So you served in the military during World War II?
World War II, yeah.
What did you do?
I code.
You code?
Yeah.
You did code work?
Yeah, code work, yeah.
Interesting. Was it Morse code that came
No,
across?
they encrypted stuff,
Oh, really?
Yeah, machines.
Where were you stationed?
Oh, around, I think I ended up in Missouri the last time.
Okay. So were you sending out messages or taking both directions?
Well, mostly mine was training.
Training people how to do it.
Or learning myself, too, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what are your memories? I mean, so you basically grew up during the Depression and into World War II. Any memories jump out from that era that you want to share? Or?
Well, I think for people in the rural areas with a farm, the Depression wasn't so bad. Because you had enough to eat, and people helped one another.
Right.
And one thing I vividly remember is that the farms shared labor.
Okay.
If they needed help on certain, then nobody worried that, you've got 5 minutes more than I did, or so on. If they needed help when they had to cut tobacco or haying,
all the kids and the uncles and everybody went over and helped out.
And there I got acquainted with one of the first World War I veterans. He was, I guess, still boarded out at one of the farms or something. And I'd go over to the next farm and help there, and this man would be there. I think Harry, I can't remember his last name, was there. And I asked my father, I said, Harry never talks. He just chews on his cigar and mumbles once in a while. And he'd bring us fish when he went fishing, even eels. Mm-hmm. And I said, "What's the matter with Harry?" And he said he's shell-shocked.
Really? Huh.
And that, I mean, you just, then, you know, it was out, and not mentally off, but just out of society.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I guess that, you know, now they call it PTSD, or they have all
I
different
guess they
terms.
have some, yeah.
I guess the human reaction to having bombs blow up around you hasn't changed much
Yeah.
since they invented them, right? So, I mean, there's always that issue. Now, you had, that era must have had a lot of World War I veterans. I mean, that was their war, basically.
Oh, yeah. That's the one that I remember most.
Okay. Any other characters from that era that you?
In Windsor, I remember there was still one Civil War veteran.
Oh, really? Okay. Did
I think they were dying out.
Yeah. That's amazing. Huh? If you were to talk about that era, what would you, and compare it to maybe some later years, what would be the biggest change that you remember from that era, to today, other than would be just the growth, or was
the increase in affluence?
Oh, really? Okay. In Granby.
Well, in Granby, especially in Granby, yeah.
It's a fairly wealthy town.
See, when we moved to Granby, I think it was 1,100 people.
Okay.
That was 1936.
And now, what's the population now?
I think it's over 11,000 now.
Okay, when you yeah.
So now it isn't a large town,
right.
but the change is still a big change.
Dramatic, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I can remember even 20, 30 years ago, the population was substantially.
Things really started to change after World War II.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you walk us through your early years meeting your wife and what you did for a job and where you taught, and just fill us in on those details.
As I said, I got this job with the Employment Service.
Okay.
Did I explain how I got that?
Yep, you asked for the
I asked for it, and I got it the next day, so to speak.
Yep.
And that was interesting, the people that I'd meet coming in for jobs.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so they were just a lot of people out of the military that were looking for
a lot of military people and other people. I especially remember the people, the day laborers who would come in, and when they wanted just enough to get another bottle.
Okay.
They'd unload cars, the railroad cars.
Yeah.
Or wash dishes in some restaurant.
Okay.
And if you ever looked at some of the people, you wouldn't go to that restaurant.
They were washing the dishes.
They should have been washed first before they washed it.
Yeah, but that was kind of like, that was a government position?
Yeah, well, that was the federal government.
Okay, so that kind of, now
and then it was taken over by the state afterwards.
Now you have temporary agencies that do most of that day laboring stuff. I mean,
but this all went through the
employment agency.
Employment agency.
Interesting. So,
yeah.
Huh. Okay, so that was probably a holdover from the Depression.
Yeah, I think so. And the service of veterans too, because the veterans coming in to get there.
Quite an influx of discharged veterans that needed work.
Yeah.
Now that was also the era the building just took off to deal with the baby boom, right?
Oh yeah, that's when it took off. It started to take off.
So you had a lot of growth everywhere, and as you were building your own family. So you met your wife, and you had how many kids? 5?
5.
And when did you have your first child? Do you remember approximately?
I think the first year we were married.
And you remember?
We were married in 1956.
Okay, so you were 36.
I was late for people for that age. We were late.
Yeah. Okay, so you had your first child in 56, which was right in the middle of the baby.
36. I mean, that was the year.
Okay.
So I was trying to figure what. I was 36 when we were married.
Okay, so that was right in the middle of the baby boom. I mean, there was.
Oh yeah, it was building. Yeah, we contributed to the baby boom. We contributed to that.
Your contribution. So you had 5 children after that, and they all went to school in Granby?
They all went to Granby schools and received a very good education.
You know, where were you living now? Because you weren't living at your family's.
We were living on the farm on North Granby Road, 329 North Granby Road.
Okay, the second.
That's the
second.
And my daughter and son-in-law are there now.
Okay, so that stayed in the family. That's interesting.
Yeah, we've managed that so far.
That's great. Great. Did your kids all went to school in Granby for elementary school?
As I said, received a very good education.
Yeah, and that would be what school?
What schools? I trying to think. One daughter went to Utica because that would be the only place she could get occupational therapy.
Oh no, I mean in Granby. What were
Granby?
what were the schools then?
Wells Road School.
Oh, right across the street
From you. And I had, by coincidence, had been the chairman of the building committee for that school.
Okay.
Because that was quite a fiasco before that school got built.
Okay.
Because the town had turned down some other school, which they thought was too expensive.
Okay. That never changes, does it?
No, so then they lost whatever they put into that, but they wanted a cheaper school.
Okay.
And I tell people, that's where I learned the difference between cheap and inexpensive.
Okay.
They wanted a cheap school, and they got a cheap school.
Right, right.
And they had things they had to fix too soon. If they'd spent a little more.
So they invested their money, and then they had to invest some shortly thereafter.
I mean, like wooden door, your window frames wood instead of metal and sort of things like that.
Yeah, I guess especially in a growing town, there's got to be a lot of financial pressure to kind of keep costs down.
Yeah, but sometimes you increase expenses.
Absolutely. Especially when you're investing in something that's town-related. It's going to have you're not going to move. You're going to use that as long as it's a functioning.
But it was very interesting for me to watch and see how they built the new school there. They saved the old school, built around it.
So Wells Road had two versions, basically. You had the first one they built, and then they had to rebuild completely around it?
Yeah, they did. It's a wonderful job. I had my doubts when they started, but I'll give them credit.
It's a great location up there. It's beautiful.
It's a nice location. They have a nice playground there.
Yeah.
They did a wonderful job.
That's great. So your kids attended that school?
Yeah, they attended that school.
All of them? All five?
I think all five. Some of them might have gone to Kelly Lane. I can't remember. I had to switch back and forth.
Where they started shifting the grades around?
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So you've been that was one committee that you served on. You've served on quite a few. You want to just touch on those?
Board of Education. I served on that. The first few terms that I had were when Granby didn't have their own superintendent then.
Right.
They had a district superintendent with the other towns.
Really? Okay.
Because there were needs to have a superintendent
population
here.
Now I think they require every town to have a superintendent.
But that's what's supplied by the state, I think, at that time.
So it was just you were on the Board of Ed. What were some of the other boards or commissions that you served on?
Board of Ed. I served on planning and zoning.
Okay.
Town treasurer.
Okay.
Let's see what else. I've been active in Republican politics.
Okay.
Politics have always interested me.
Right.
And somebody said, politics are fine, but you don't take it personally.
That's absolutely true. If you do, you should take a step back.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So you have you've been very involved in the town. So you've probably had a pretty bird's eye view of a lot of the changes that have.
I can see how they came about. All of them. Yeah.
So I'm going to run through. Well, first of all, before I forget, why don't you name your children?
Well, let's see. We'll start with Margaret.
Okay.
And then there's Catherine.
Okay.
And then Anne.
Okay.
And then we had twins.
Oh, okay.
Fred and Carol.
Okay. So you had one boy.
One boy.
One boy and four girls.
Okay. Yeah. So it's his responsibility to carry on the family name.
All right. So I like to at least acknowledge the family.
Oh yeah, that's a great family. As I said, my one daughter the therapist went down with us to Florida.
Okay.
She said, "No way, you're not going down there, your mother, by yourselves."
Right. Should keep an eye on you.
Keep an eye on and helped us. It was great. She says, "Well, you're getting your money back now for what you spent on my education."
There you go. Right. Your own personal assistant.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you've been involved in Granby for a long time. Let's go back to when you first got involved. I asked you what the biggest change. You said the size of the town.
Size of the
growth.
And the financial standing of the people in the town.
Okay, so you say the demographic is wealthier.
Well, I would say much
Say
wealthier.
Per capita, Granby's probably.
Yeah. All these Farmington Valley towns are.
Yeah. Granby, I think, just probably in the last 20 years. Maybe.
Oh, you
wrong.
know, that's right.
just
I would
seems-
say I'd agree with you about the last 20 years.
Yeah, it seems like.
I mean, before, if you wanted to be somebody who didn't live in Granby, you would go to Simsbury or Avon.
You could you get a better deal on a house in Granby, though. So what of all the changes that you've seen in town, aside from just the overall growth, what do you think was the best change?
The best change for schools that they had from the one-room schools
Right.
to a consolidated school.
So you were right in the middle of that. You
I
saw
remember when they built
benefit.
those schools, and that was hard work to get that through.
Right.
People to get it.
Yeah, it's just now. Let me ask you. Just financially, there was a lot of resistance, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
and Frank Kern's one school was named after him,
Yep.
and he did a lot of work to push to get the schools consolidated.
Okay. So they worked to. It was as always. It was a challenge to get the funding for that service.
But you have to get people to approve it.
Right.
That's
It's one
always
thing to have a
problem.
plan. It's another to pay for it. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the general development of the education infrastructure and system, and you're proud of that.
And then
You
the
think that-
services that we have here now. Look at the library that we have.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
and the facilities that they have for older people like myself.
Okay.
All the activities.
You got your own senior center.
Yeah, that's right, the senior center.
And it's very active from what I
It
understand.
is, yes, have a lot of programs there.
If you were to, you were involved with a lot of this, so I'll preface it by saying we're not trying to criticize anything, but if there was anything you would do differently, having sat in the middle of a lot of these changes over the years, is there anything that you think, in hindsight, that you would have done differently or not done at all or done?
I think Granby has done a very good job in watching how things grow.
Okay. So you think it's been managed
I
to
think
your-
it's
to
been
your
managed
liking?
very well. I go over to Avon and I see what has happened over there
Right.
when they turn a golf course into a
Shopping.
mall.
Yeah.
You know, I think Granby has done a very good job.
They certainly seem to have contemplated seriously most of the major changes.
Yeah. And they've saved a lot of land, open space has been saved.
Right. Now, if those sorts of changes that you have seen, and as they've kind of been developed, is there anything? I mean, I'll give you a good example. In East Granby, when they changed Route 20, they shifted it so the main street was no longer the main street.
Right, I remember that, yeah.
And that's the type of thing that I always think of, that maybe if they had put a little more effort into that. But I guess Granby really doesn't, there's nothing that's coming to mind that strikes you as being something that you would have shifted in history.
No, I think they changed Granby Center so that it was easier to get around there. But now, from rumors that I hear, you know, that Route 20 coming over from the airport,
Right.
they're doing that piecemeal, making it a
Yes.
4-lane highway.
Yep. They're working their way.
Well, as the town planner said, what are they going to do when they dump a 4-lane highway into Granby Center?
Right. A lot of stuff to move.
And the other rumors I've heard is that that'll go right over to the state line.
Right.
And you think about it, there are not many good east-west roads in the state.
No.
And that would service Bradley Field, too,
Right.
from all of eastern Massachusetts,
Right.
western Connecticut.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
people take different routes to Bradley now because there is no.
But that would be a direct route.
It would.
Be a direct route over, but
It would be a difficult thing to digest for the center of Granby
it would be some problem to figure out how
Yeah.
they're going to go through Granby.
to work it through.
And they should, in my opinion, have that figured, the state should have that figured out before they dump the 4-lane highway in the center.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of back and forth. That'd probably be quite a few years down the road because I know the one, just the expansion in Granby East Granby was in the works for like 20 years.
Of course, I think one mistake that the state made, there was talk at one time when the Canal Line Railroad went to put Route 10 on that,
On that
on the railroad.
right away.
On the railroad.
Okay.
Now, I enjoy the trails. I think they're marvelous.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think that's money well spent.
Yeah.
But that could have taken all the traffic out of the towns.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. It would
That
have
would have taken traffic right out of the towns.
shifted it. But that's always a double-edged sword. Because if you take the traffic away, you lose the business.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it certainly is appealing in some ways.
But on the other hand, you can make mistakes like they did in Hartford and divide the city in half.
Exactly.
There. And now, what are they going to do there? That's falling apart.
Right.
What are they going to do?
Yeah, this is tough.
Are they going to just, are they going to even put it on the ground?
Right.
But we know about the big dig in Boston, so
Yeah,
I don't
that's-
know. So,
I don't think we're going to be spending $1 billion
Yeah,
anytime
but-
soon in Connecticut on a road.
but that does divide the city of Hartford in
It
half.
really does, yeah. It's unfortunate. Now, so you of your experience on the different boards, did you which board did you feel you had the most impact on, or did you feel like you were able to impact?
Well, I think I'm both, but if I had maybe a little more on I was planning on zoning. I was
Okay.
very interested in that.
So you had your finger on the pulse of all the changes that were happening.
Yeah.
What were the big debates? I mean, what were the contentious issues as development occurred?
Well, people don't realize that things have to go by rules.
Right.
And
Try a 7-year-old.
And they could say, why don't you just stop this?
Right.
Well, you have rules set up,
Yep.
and you go by the rules.
Right.
And the person on the board, who I think did a very good job of explaining that,
Yeah.
was Put Brown. He was a member of there, and he would explain that to people. All right, no, we can't just say to people, no, you can't do this.
Right.
We have rules set up, and you meet the rules. Well, that's it.
You have to justify your decision.
You have to justify your decision.
Yeah. Was there any particular issue or application that you remember stands out?
Well, and the biggest one that created the most stir, I think, was when Walmart wanted to come.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
That was a
Where
big
were
one.
they going to locate? Down by Stop and Shop?
You know where Stop and Shop is, down in that area.
Was that prior to Stop and Shop, or was
That was prior to Stop and Shop.
They were going to put a Walmart in there.
In that, and further where the over 55 housing is now.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that was-
just north of there.
Just north of
and,
there.
And that was resisted pretty strongly.
That was
too.
resisted strongly. Yeah, that went on, and long hearings on that one.
Yeah. How did that was? Yeah, I can remember reading it. I didn't live in the area then, but I remember reading about it in the paper. It was pretty contentious. Yeah.
And I've always been very impressed with Fran Armentano, the way his lead.
And he's a town planner.
He's the town planner.
Okay,
Been
yeah.
very impressed.
Yeah. Now, what was it? The north end of Granby was always back in the jumping back a little bit, was mostly farming, right?
That mostly farming. Yeah.
And the south end, was there any industry that's gone now, or was there any?
There's never much industry.
Never much.
Not in my time, I gather. In further times, they were way back.
Yeah.
In West Granby, there was some industry.
Okay, yeah, because I think of places like Terrafil and places like that, they had some pretty large factories.
You know how Terrafil got its name?
It was a protest, right? Wasn't it?
No. Because I think whatever kind of weaving they did down there was a tariff on it to import it.
Okay.
So they said, all right, we'll make this stuff here.
Okay.
So they built the building and imported the weavers and the people who had the knowledge.
Okay.
And if you go to Terrafil, you can tell which houses are for the help, they're still there, and the nice brick houses for the bosses.
There's some beautiful houses down there.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So is it all? But there was some comic relief there, but call it Terrafil.
But that's how it got called Terrafil. That's how the name Terrafil came about.
Yeah, interesting. So they were trying to avoid the tariff.
Territory. They avoided the tariff. They could have made it here, there'd be no tariff.
Yeah.
They'd send over.
That's great. So you had the farms in the north side of town. You had farming probably throughout the town, basically outside of the center. Right?
Yeah.
Do you remember the center in that era? Was there more? I mean, you've got a fairly vibrant center now. You've got a lot of little shops and stuff. What are your memories of that area? I mean, you probably stared at those maps quite a bit when you were in planning and zoning, huh? As it changes.
Well, going way back, there was just the one store in the center.
Okay.
I mean, for groceries.
Right.
And the old-fashioned stores, they sold more than groceries.
Okay. And it was probably not dissimilar from all the other smaller towns. I mean, you had.
No, I wouldn't say there's anything different, except that I think the growth has been more in a good manner.
You've certainly managed it. It still strikes me. You're saying there was 1,000 people here at one point?
1,400.
1,400.
1,400 when we moved here in 1936.
And so you've times 10 almost or 8 or whatever it is, your population. That's pretty dramatic.
Then remember, you had to build schools.
Yeah, all the infrastructure to support all that.
Yeah.
So, are there any characters from that era that jump out at you, or you always
I
find yourself talking about?
Well, I want to write an article someday.
Okay.
Because a friend gave me these clippings from the newspaper,
All right.
and his father, they call him Lefty Messenger,
Okay.
and the other one they call Two-Gun Hotchkiss.
Okay.
They were the police force in Granby.
Oh, two-gun, huh?
Yeah, and that was the police force.
Okay.
And he gave me some of the clippings, like one that stands out in my mind of what happened there.
Yep.
They arrested one man that shot an apple off another man's head with a rifle.
Ouch.
Both of them were inebriated.
Right.
And all it did was crease his little blood on it in the way. But
He didn't miss.
he didn't miss.
That's
He's a good
fortunate,
shot.
yeah.
Good shot. But I've got
Would have been a
to
completely different charge.
yeah. So I want to get those together sometime and make them.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So they were your constables.
Now that was your police force.
Police
at that time.
force,
That
okay.
was your police force.
Okay. What did any other folks from that era that you remember? That
So,
I always ask characters because everybody, I think you made
they're always. Oh, there always were characters.
colorful folks.
Always were. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you had a magic wand for Granby today, what would you do? I mean, your experience has been diverse. If there was anything, assuming it didn't cost any money, what would you change, or what would not change, but necessarily, but what would you do for the town, or what if you just had one wish, say, what would it be?
One wish.
Yeah, I mean, maybe nothing. I mean, you may be very happy with the town, but I'm just saying, if you could do one thing for the town, that
I would give them another park.
another park. Okay.
Another park with a swimming pool
Okay.
and more playgrounds.
Okay. Beautiful. Yeah. That's I asked that question of a couple other guests, and I think you're 3 for 3. They've answered it pretty much the same way. Interesting. Yeah, it does add a lot of character to the town when you have
And
someplace.
it's something that people use.
Salmon Brook's beautiful. By the way.
That's a very big. But that being for a town this size, they could use another park.
They could use another one.
Or another location.
Some beautiful spots up in the north end of town.
Oh yeah. One thing I wonder. I don't think it will ever happen, but I wonder what's going to happen with High Meadow Camp.
Oh, okay.
I remember when that was built, and I remember when that was a farm.
Okay.
Now, I don't know, if that ever is sold, there would be a tremendous opportunity for the farm.
Okay, yeah, that would be a nice addition to the town.
But I don't know if that'll ever come about. But
Yeah. Even if it did it, I guess it's going to really depend on when it does.
when it does and what the finances are.
Right now it's tough. If you were to give advice to somebody who's a member of a board or a commission, having served on so many, what would that be? What, in your experience, what's the most valuable lesson you learned in terms of being a member of one of these boards or commissions? Is there anything that...
Well, I mean, don't get upset about it. There will always be people that will upset you.
Stay cool.
When you stay cool, and,
Okay.
and that I think is important, and not take, as I say, don't take it personally.
Don't take it too serious.
Yeah. Well, it's seriously, but not personally.
Okay, right. Personally, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. All right. If you were giving advice to young children today, growing up, I mean, you got 10 grandchildren. If you were to summarize Fred's wisdom of 89 years into a soundbite, what would it be? It's a lot of pressure there. So
Well, I'd like to see them focus more on what they want to do.
Okay.
I've just finished reading an article today about how far boys are lagging behind girls today.
Okay.
And they have what they call arrested adolescence now.
Okay.
How boys go through this whole period, say in their 20s, when they don't really settle down.
Right.
And I think if they realize, well, maybe they should settle down a bit.
Right. That's interesting. You know, I always say that when you grow up in America, they tell you that you can be anything you want to be. But the other side of that is if you don't focus, you could also be nothing.
You could be nothing. That's right. That's right.
No, and that's kind of harsh. But the point is, you'll end up with a lot less of a life than you could have had.
Well, I'll give you a good example.
Yeah.
We met a young woman when we were in Florida. That's married to the son of my wife's friend.
Okay.
And I forget which one of the Central American countries she's come from.
Sure.
But she has gotten through school. She's going to be, I think, an assistant for anesthesiologists.
Okay.
And she pushed and pushed so she could do that.
Right.
Now, from what I understand, she has some brothers and sisters who just aren't doing anything.
Okay.
So, I mean, it takes the push and the drive when the person once gets here.
Right.
If something will happen, but I think if they do, it will happen.
And the contrast between the end result can be pretty stark.
Very stark. Very stark.
Yeah. No, that's a very valid or valuable lesson. I think, unfortunately, the people that could use that advice the most don't often get it. You know.
No.
They're kind of left to their own devices, where people that understand the need for some sort of plan, and their parents are planning for college ahead of time, and they're going through their
And of course, then there are probably people, their parents aren't involved at all.
Right.
And I'm not in Granby, but I think perhaps more guidance to some of these kids, especially in the inner city, would help tremendously.
Yeah, so take your life seriously and have a plan.
Yeah.
It's great advice, Fred. It's a question now. When you served on the Board of Education, what population, what years were those, approximately? I'm trying not to turn this into a test, but you've got a lot of...
Somewhere, I guess it was in the late 40s.
You started in the late 40s?
I think so. I think so. I was something like that. That's when I started with the...
Before you were married?
Before I was married, yeah.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, I was interested. I was always interested in...
Well, you were a teacher.
Yeah, so I got involved.
That helps, yeah.
So as I said, my first was getting with that World School.
Okay.
So you needed facilities and you needed good teachers.
Yeah.
And of course, to me, if there comes a choice between facilities and good teachers, it's good teachers.
I agree. And you know what? I think that's always part of the problem, though. Because not a problem. It's not really a problem, because any educator worth their salt is going to choose the curriculum and the teachers over the infrastructure.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
You know, but I think there has to be a plan to deal with the infrastructure.
You can't let it fall apart.
No.
And that's another thing that I think happens with community. That's the one thing in the budget that they'll skimp on. All right, we'll get to make the budget. We won't make any repairs this year.
Yeah.
Well, then it all accumulates, and then you're stuck with some big.
Then you got issues.
Big issues, and you got to come up with the money.
Yeah, I've had personal experience with that in East Granby. But you have basic. I mean, what would you suggest? I mean, do they manage the facilities through the Board of Education in Granby? Is that how they do it? Is there facilities maintenance?
Yeah.
I always thought it might be even more appropriate for the towns.
I thought of that too. I thought of that too.
Because it can completely differentiate, so you don't end up with...
You wouldn't duplicate equipment and so on. That's something that's a possibility. You could have the maintenance of the buildings, the grounds. It could all be...
Because it seems to take the pull of curriculum versus... for lack of a better word, paint. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It takes that out of the equation. Because, like, once again, any educator who's really committed is going to buy a new textbook rather than a new can of... You know what I mean? I mean, that's a tough position to be in. Anyway, getting back to you. So you worked till... When did you retire, Fred?
I retired, I was 62.
Okay.
And that was 21, that was 83.
1983. Well, so you've been retired
I've been most fortunate.
28 years.
Most fortunate.
That's quite a healthy retirement.
I'm very fortunate.
Very fortunate. Yeah.
Very, I mean...
And you got a great wife. She was cooking a pie when we were...
I know, I mean, I'm extremely fortunate.
Yeah. That's great, Fred. When you retired, did you find that how'd you feel? You found, obviously, you were
Well, I had
still
the farm.
involved.
I had the farm to
You had the
take
farm.
care of.
Oh, you were still working the farm?
Well, yeah, when my parents died,
Okay.
I took over the farm.
Okay. And what were you farming then? What was your...
Well, mostly subsistence for ourselves. We sold some vegetables.
Okay. Do they still do that there?
They always got the stand there.
Okay, great. That's great. It's nice to see people actually still be able to keep something like that going.
Yeah, well,
especially within a family.
And on the farm, I've given away the development rights to the land trust.
Okay.
Because I put so much time in there and developed different things. I said, I don't want to see houses there.
You didn't want to see a Walmart going on.
I don't want to see houses.
anything.
So I gave those development rights to the land trust. And the land, whenever it's sold, you understand how
Yeah, you can sell the property, but
you sell
can't
the
develop it,
property,
right?
but what the people can do are restricted.
You've restricted the deed for
For agricultural uses.
Right. That's
You
great.
can put up agricultural buildings, but not houses.
Yeah, that's a gift to the town. I think.
So, and that's one thing I'm glad I did. That's right.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Granby thanks you.
Yeah.
So, if you were when you were, I'm sorry, we jumped off education. You were in education from the late '40s until when? When did you?
Well, when I retired in, what did I say, 83?
83?
Yeah.
And that's when you left the Board of Ed also?
No, I was on I was able to do more.
Oh, yeah.
And-
Okay,
and
so
when
you stayed on the Board of Ed through that whole...
No,
Oh,
I got
okay.
back on again.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
was
So
a
you were right
period
at the
when
beginning in the building committee.
I was off for a while, and then
Okay.
when I came back, had a little more time on my hands, so I
Right.
was able to go back on that.
I mean, that's a fascinating span of time, though. There were some dramatic changes in education. What are the biggest changes you saw there? I mean, what technology?
Is growth of
The size of the system?
The size of the system.
Okay. What about educationally? Have you seen much change that way? I mean, in terms of the curriculum or the...
Well, I don't know, the detail, but from what I've seen from our own children, and we've had 2 grandsons over there.
Right.
And they're now, one is going to graduate this year.
Right.
And I would have nothing to criticize.
Yeah.
I think Granby, it's an excellent school system.
There's nothing. Sometimes you hear that you turn the clock back on a certain component or something.
No,
I
I think they leave there well educated.
That's good to hear.
And
Yeah.
if they're not, it's their own fault.
Yeah. Well,
You know, but some kids, it's an old story. You can lead a horse to water, but
Right,
you can't make him drink.
can't save the world.
No. Then there will always be some kids that'll lag behind.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. When I was talking to some folks and asking them people in Granby that would be appropriate to interview, your name came up several times, and I just thought it was unique the number of different positions you've held in town, because planning and zoning is very different from Board of Education.
Yeah, and treasurer, that was different.
And the
I
treasurer,
saw
so-
it from different angles.
Right. So you're happy with the state of the state in Granby today? You're happy?
Yeah. Well, one thing I helped out too. I helped out
State
over
of the town.
at the health. This is for the state.
Right.
Somebody asked me. They have you for in a teaching medical center. They have a lot of experiments go on.
Yep.
And they have to have animals for that.
Okay. Yep.
And there has to be an animal care committee.
You're talking about UConn.
I'm talking about UConn
Yep.
Medical Center in Farmington.
Right.
And somebody asked me, because I knew I have an interest in animals. That was after I was retired, and they said, would you be interested in serving on that?
Right.
So I served on that animal care committee for a number of years.
Oh, wow.
And that I found most interesting too, what was going on.
So that the charge of that committee was just to ensure that the animals were properly treated.
They're properly treated and met the federal requirements,
Okay.
because it's very strict federal requirements.
This is an odd question, but what kind of animals were you talking about?
Everything from small animals to mice and rats to pigs.
Really? Okay. So diversity of
Diversity.
experiments there. Yeah.
I found that very interesting.
Yeah, I bet. It's kind of.
You learn quite a lot.
Yeah. You did that after you retired, also.
That was after I
Yeah.
retired.
So you didn't. Yeah. Many people say that you retire and you find a million things to do. So it's quite a...
But I mean, I've never been bored since I've retired.
I bet you were. No.
No.
So, do you still serve on any boards or commissions, or are you?
The only thing I
fully
serve
retired?
on now, still serve on, is the cemetery.
Okay.
I'm a director of the cemetery.
Okay, that's great.
And one time, I always thought that wouldn't be anybody would trouble you there. But I found it isn't the people that are there, it's the relatives of the people
really?
there.
Doing stuff that they shouldn't.
Well, they want this bush cut out, or this should be done, or that should be done.
Yeah.
And but I found that that's very interesting too.
Yeah. It's always
So-
funny what you find when you. I find any board or commission you're on, it never quite what you expect.
And I think this cemetery here has something that they're not having other cemeteries around here is a columbarium. That is a stone structure with like drawers in it
Yep.
where people can put ashes. See if they want them and try to just throw
So
them
like a
to the-
mini crypt.
like a small crypt just
Yeah,
for
yeah.
ashes, yeah.
Yep.
And then the name would be on there, and that's all recorded in the town office, and so on.
Interesting.
So that is, and it saves space, of course.
Yeah, a lot of people. It seems like that's become a lot more popular lately. Is
And well, that's I think
cremation.
I think Bill Carmen says it's increased tremendously in Granby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed just in my own family, it's a choice more so than ever before.
Oh,
It used to be.
yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So when you fully retire, are you going to stay in the area? Or are you going to?
Oh, I'm staying here.
You're not moving from Granby? You got your
why should I
daughter.
move? Why should I move? My
Yeah.
daughter is here.
Yeah.
You know, and I know people. Of course, people that I know keep disappearing. You know, they die one after the other.
But you got new grandkids coming up, so there's always a new person.
No.
Yeah. So, well, it's a pleasure having you here tonight. I mean, it's certainly we could probably go on for hours
Oh, I
and
could
hours.
talk and talk.
If there's anything that I didn't hit on that you want to share, feel free. I mean, there's any story that you feel is important to get on. You said you wrote a history for the Historical Society.
I told him, you know, some of the things that I remembered about Granby.
Yeah, is there anything from that you remember that was that you could summarize?
What I remember is one of the small farms.
Gone on the small
Farms, yeah.
Yeah.
And I can drive around sometime, and I'll tell Edith I can remember there's where this farm was, there where that farm was,
Yeah.
and that is kind of sad in a way. But as Edith tells me, things change and they grow. I mean, you know, it's not going to stay the same.
Yeah, those are your memories. So
Those are my very fun. I have a picture of Granby Center in 1936, an aerial view,
right.
and you'd be surprised at that. When you bring it back, I'll show you it.
Okay, that'd be great. So yeah, I can imagine. I mean, when you just talking about the sheer numbers of population growth, it has to be dramatically different. Yeah. They've really actually even started to try to curtail some of the development in town, especially in the western part of town that was getting.
Well, I mean, another big thing that the town has is McLean's game.
Yeah, that's huge.
People don't realize what they have there.
I know, it's beautiful.
That they have the use of that.
Yeah.
And that would all be houses today.
Yeah. Big houses.
Yep, the big houses.
Yeah.
McMansions.
Yeah. No, that's a beautiful part. I'm always struck when I look on a map at the size of that protected area.
It's a lot of land, and they've added to it too, you know.
Yeah, right.
And of course, then the land trust has some land,
Yep.
and the town has some land.
Right. Well, once again, Fred, I'd really like to thank you for coming on here
Well,
tonight.
it's been my pleasure, and I'm glad to tell what I know about
It sounds like the town of Granby owes you quite a thank you for all your years of service and many things you've done. And I certainly thank you for
again. I enjoyed being here.
It's a pleasure. Yeah. But once again, this is Reflections. This is our first guest from Granby. We've interviewed quite a few folks from East Granby, where I started doing the show, and we've recently interviewed some folks from Heartland, and it seems like we've stumbled into an extremely appropriate guest for our first show here tonight. And once again, I'd like to thank him and thank you, our audience, for sharing this night with us. Have a good night. Thank you.